Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, July 29th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the alarm bells being rang in the Pennsylvania Senate race on behalf of the Republican Party towards some of their more major donors and to the entire National Committee, as Dr. Oz doesn't seem to be positioned to win a race that the Republicans currently hold in the U.S. Senate. The state of Pennsylvania is a very closely watched race because the determination of the balance of power will be determined quite literally in states like Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz and John Fetterman have been in a closely watched race ever since May 17th, the day that the primary was held, in which the Republicans decided to nominate the TV personality Mehmet Oz. Now, Dr. Oz is someone who has entered into politics definitely more recently. He hasn't held any public office, and many Republicans were initially worried that if he was to receive this nomination, he would not know how to move forward. And it looks like a lot of those concerns and cares have actually come to fruition. Right now, Dr. Oz seems to be not so focused on the campaign trail and losing to John Fetterman by epic proportions when it comes down to data from conservative, liberal, and independent sources all across the state. Now, these alarm bells are being rang largely in an effort to push Dr. Oz to change something up about his campaign. Quite literally speaking, Dr. Oz is not on track for victory, and you can find that to be true no matter what source you're taking a look at. Whether this is a Republican internal, a Democratic internal, or an independent source, all of the data concludes very definitively that John Fetterman defeats Dr. Oz in a head-to-head matchup. Now, polls are not the only thing that really guide me in this direction. The state of Pennsylvania is a state that Joe Biden won in the last election, and Democrats did very well in 2018. Now, I will say that in 2016, Republicans did end up winning this Senate race despite being the non-favorites according to FiveThirtyEight and polling data within the state. But what I will say is that polling data in Pennsylvania has actually been quite accurate over the past couple of years. It was only really off in 2016, and even then, it was arguably within the margin of error. Hillary Clinton was meant to win by 1.9, Donald Trump won by 0.7. The margin of error here on average was about 3 to 4 points. So realistically, it wasn't too far off from what it had actually expected. But looking at the data now, even with a margin of error of upwards of 5, sometimes 6 points depending on the poll, John Fetterman still likely wins this race. He currently holds a 9-point lead according to the Real Clear Politics average and an 8-point lead according to FiveThirtyEight. Now, Dr. Oz hasn't exactly trounced John Fetterman in a singular poll we have seen yet, and that's why it gets very difficult for the Republican Party to see how this race still remains winnable. But what I will say is that don't count out the Republican Party just yet. I think that these alarm bells are being rang for a reason. It shows that they are terrified about the prospect of John Fetterman entering into the U.S. Senate. And I think they see that as a threat largely because Fetterman is, 1, anti-filibuster, 2, vehemently pro-legalization of marijuana, pro-gay, pro-everything that the Republican Party simply does not stand for in most cases. And they're afraid that this candidate, who is likely to the left of many other Senate Democrats, could win in a swing state in a 2022 type of environment. In fact, they are so afraid that they've begun pitching to national Republicans and mega donors other/alternative routes to the majority should Pennsylvania not work out. It is very rare that a party with an incumbent senator in their own type of wave year go to their top donors, go to their top colleagues and say, we have ways around this. Sort of, in a sense, giving up the race before it has even begun. Now, I don't think these alarm bells on their own are telling us that Republicans are entirely giving up Pennsylvania, but I don't think that it helps that this talk is happening so early on in the campaign season. Usually you would see a campaign be abandoned in the final few weeks once you know that the race is locked down for the opposition party. Democrats initially invested in Ohio in 2016, then they lost it by 21. They didn't spend that much money in it by the final stretch of the campaign because they knew that it was a lost cause. Typically, you would see that happening, and typically you would see these conversations circulating, but now we're seeing them over 100 days before the midterm elections. Now, this also doesn't help that this is accompanied by a very similar timing in which the Republican Governors Association has still continued to refuse to fund Doug Mastriano's governor bid within the state. If you take a look at the polling data in the state of Pennsylvania, you will find that in the race for governor, Josh Shapiro has maintained a pretty significant lead as well, 6 points across the state. Now, it might be interesting to you that the Senate race and the governor's race are a bit different. The Senate race is a little bit more lopsided in favor of the Democratic Party than the governor's race, but in terms of overall vote share percentage, Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman seem to be running about even. And the governor's race here is one that Doug Mastriano seems to be really trying to contest, even though the Republicans don't exactly seem too convinced that he's going to win. He's one of the top names across the GOP in the state of Pennsylvania. Donald Trump endorsed him. Donald Trump is likely going to campaign for him. But Doug Mastriano doesn't really stand that much of a chance at the governorship. That point being brought up, I want to say that the Senate combination here, Senate and governor combination here, is one of the weakest two tickets that I have seen for the GOP in the entirety of this campaign season. And the fact that they come from the same state is why these alarm bells are happening. Dr. Oz isn't going to be carried across the finish line by Doug Mastriano, and Doug Mastriano is not going to carry Dr. Oz is not going to carry him across the finish line either. These two are a poison to the Republican Party. If this was 2020, these races would be truly 10-point races in favor of the Democratic Party. If this was 2018, you're talking 15 to 20-point races. These candidates are simply unelectable, but the national environment makes it so they are at least somewhat within the realm of possibility at being elected. But some of these national Republicans don't seem super convinced. It says that they're feeling down on Dr. Oz. They're talking here, freaking out, conferring with other members of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, because these races are meant to be the ones that are the winnable ones. But now the GOP is trying to find workarounds. They recognize they have to defend their own crucial swing states, such as Wisconsin and North Carolina, and they're actively trying to flip Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and New Hampshire. They really try to hammer down this point to their mega donors and to the top officials in the NRSC that they only need one singular seat. And that's correct. All they need is one. But the problem is, when you take a look at every single one that they supposedly want to flip, they don't exactly have the best candidates or top tier quality ones that I would say even up there. Don't have to be the best, but a lot of them are really lacking on a very low bar here and are simply making it so many of these candidates are viewed as unelectable. This movement and discussion has come as a result of the Fox News poll that has just been released in the state that shows John Fetterman ahead by 11 and Josh Shapiro ahead by 10. This is a Fox News poll. This was circulating across Republican networks, across Republican television. So, of course, it's going to sound some alarm bells. Because when these mega donors are listening from their, New Jersey mansion about their Senate race that they're funding or self-funding, you are going to hear people concerned. Because they're watching the conservative media and they're finding out from the conservative media, from a poll done by the conservative media, that the candidate that I just spent millions of dollars on because Donald Trump endorsed him is now losing by 11 to what Republicans would rate John Fetterman as a radical socialist. These things don't play well amongst conservative media, and I do think it is a pressure play to Dr. Oz. But what I also think is that the GOP is showing that they are at least afraid of what is happening. Not just afraid, terrified. Because these discussions would never leak unless they wanted something to come of the leak. These conversations wouldn't be reported on unless they were substantial enough to be reported on, which is exactly what they are. It actually gets a little bit more desperate, I would say, and not me trying to bash the Republican Party in any way, but it does seem a bit desperate when you look at some of the states that they are considering targeting, or at least prioritizing, in the event that Pennsylvania goes underwater. You can read this article. There's a couple of others about this same conversations that have been had amongst the top Republicans across the nation. But specifically, they're talking about Washington and Colorado. Now, these are two states that are entirely out of the Republican Party's chances at victory. Currently on FiveThirtyEight, Republicans have a 12% chance in Colorado. In Washington, a 4% chance. And I think that's true. I think that these chances are accurate, because these are solid blue states. Colorado went to Biden in 2020 by 14 points, Washington by about 16 points. The point being that these states are practically unwinnable for the GOP. But because they aren't rated as safe Democrat by every single pollster or political network, you find that Republicans are grasping for straws to look to the next Senate race that they could potentially win and counteract the loss in the state of Pennsylvania. But honestly speaking, these races are entirely out of the question. The GOP is just looking for different ways to ensure that their top officials are not afraid that they will not win control of the U.S. Senate. Because quite frankly, it would be embarrassing. This 8-point lead in Pennsylvania is embarrassing. There's no other way around it. Taking a look at the 538 forecast, Republicans see these numbers, and while they might not entirely believe Nate Silver, they can't ignore the hard data, especially data coming from their own internal firms. You take a look at Fabrizio, you find that this pollster in specific has typically been funded by Republican campaigns to do outreach and do polls amongst general populaces. And in both of these polls, they find that Fetterman wins by 6, Shapiro wins by 3. Another nonpartisan poll from Suffolk University, Shapiro wins by 4, Fetterman wins by 9. The point is, every source you look at comes to the same conclusion, and that makes a lot of sense. Now, there is going to be people out there that say, these polls are incorrect, Republicans aren't terrified, they're just saying this, whatever it might be. But realistically speaking, have polls been that inaccurate in Pennsylvania? I already showed you that in 2016 they were off by 3 points. But what happens when you're off by 3 points in these races? Democrats still win by 2.7% and 5.7%. In 2020, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, guess how much the average was off versus the actual result? 1.2% versus 1.2%. Very interesting if you ask me that it was spot on. Maybe the polls aren't as far off as we might think. 2018, Pennsylvania Senate race, Bob Casey was meant to win by 14. He won by 12. A 2-point difference, actually a 1.4% difference, about a 1-point difference. Take a 1-point difference off of these, guess what? Democrats win both. The governor's race in 2018 in Pennsylvania. What happened in this race? Well, Tom Wolf was meant to win by 20. What did he win by? 17. Okay, you're seeing a difference of 3 points. Again, apply it, same exact result. Democrats win both. Looking at the Pennsylvania Senate race in 2016, it was a bit different. Katie McGinty was meant to win by 2, lost by 1.6. But at most, a 3.6% swing in the past few elections in favor of the GOP. And guess what? Still do that. And what do you find? The Democrats still come out ahead. We have seen the race narrow from July to the actual election. In July of 2020, Joe Biden was up in some polls by 6 points, 7 points, and it did reduce by about 5-6 points. And if that does happen, maybe Josh Shapiro would lose his election. But John Fetterman still seems to be holding out strong. Fetterman's outperforming where Biden was in a year where Democrats won an electoral trifecta. And this isn't the same national environment. We need to keep reminding ourselves that 2022 is a red wave year. It might be harder to believe looking at numbers such as this one, but don't get me wrong. The House is an automatic pickup for the GOP no matter what. The Republican Party will control at least one chamber of Congress next session. But also, I will say that it is more difficult to believe that a red wave is going to happen in the Senate elections, where months ago, I was entirely confident that it would be. Looking at my past projections, take a look at this projection from November 4th, 2021. I had the Republicans at a 54 to 46 advantage. Today, that is narrowed down to 50 to 50. I know I have critics out there that say I'm trying to wish cast in favor of the Democratic Party or lean my predictions in favor of the Democratic Party. But I didn't see many of those complaints when I had the Republican Party ahead. The thing is, the national environment has changed. I made a video yesterday talking about how our generic ballot nationwide is the closest GOP advantage in 8 months. 0.2% according to FiveThirtyEight, 0.8% according to Real Clear Politics. How does this happen? Ask the Supreme Court. Ask the decisions. Ask the people who are focused on different issues than what Americans actually care about. At the end of the day, the American public is not nearly as lopsided in favor of Republicans as they were in 2014 and 2010. The fact they have Republicans up at all means it will be a red wave when it comes down to the House, but Democrats could be on track to pick up one singular Senate seat. And before we get into it, talking about previous elections such as 2018, where the Republican Party won 2 more seats than the Democrats when it came down to the Senate elections, even though Democrats won control of the House, and how I refer to 2018 as a blue wave. What I will say is that criticism would be fair if it was the same Senate map, but it wasn't. 2018, the Republican Party was in a very much offensive position. In 10 states that had Democratic incumbents that Donald Trump won 2 years prior. Let's list them. Arizona, Montana, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Florida, Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota. These are states that had Democratic incumbents. Arizona did not. Don't get me wrong. Sorry about that. Made a mistake. That was a pickup for Democrats. But 10 states with Democratic incumbents, and Democrats won a good amount of them. 6 of them, Donald Trump states from 2016 that, had Democratic incumbents. But they were defending a lot more territory than what they are defending today. If this was 2010 or 2014, the question would be, do Republicans win 55 seats? Not do they win 50 seats or 51 or potentially now 49. The GOP's struggle to win in the state of Pennsylvania has really seemed to have shaken them to their core, to a point where they are trying to find workarounds where there really are none. The remaining swing states are the ones that have already been touched and discussed. Washington and Colorado are not going to join the bunch. Colorado at one point I did think would be competitive, but taking a look at the approval rating numbers, taking a look at where we are, and taking a look at the governor election there, because yes, a good Democratic candidate or good Republican candidate on one other race will eventually help you, which is why it's so bad for the GOP that they have 2 bad candidates for the Pennsylvania races. But Colorado, Washington, entirely out of the question when it comes down to the Senate races for the Democratic Party. Republicans will not win there. Democrats will easily skate to re-election. And looking at the remaining states, there are a bunch the GOP can target. Nevada, Arizona, New Hampshire. But they're very big, seemingly afraid feeling in the state of Pennsylvania is being heard all across the nation by many, many political pundits and those within the state that are campaigning for either side of the aisle. And I can't tell you that the Republican Party is too comforted at this point in time. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.